Okay, folks, I'm going to give you a basic endgame lesson on domination. Domination is where you have one piece that blocks another piece. So what happens if you look here between this knight and this bishop? The knight is attacking the squares where the pawns are located, all right? Pretty basic stuff, so not difficult. Domination position between these two is two squares. So what black moves here, he forks these pawns. White can play bishop here to defend everything. Okay, this is the domination. So you'll also see this domination occur in a position like this. This is another common place for this to occur, and I'll show you why. Okay, so it's white to move in this. We don't care about the rest of the pieces. I'm just showing you the important ones. White wants to move his bishop to e3, but knight to g4 can be annoying. So white could play h3, but it creates a lot of weaknesses, especially on g3, and you already have this f-pawn moved, so you could have some nasty weaknesses for knight. For example, with the help, knight h5, knight g3 could be really a problem. But white doesn't want to do that. So white would play king into the corner. And you'll see this in different openings. So that black castles for whatever reason. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Now white can play bishop to e3. Because if black wants to annoy this bishop with knight g4, white can simply play the domination move, bishop to g1. Okay, this happens fairly often in openings. Inside of the first 12 moves, maybe. It's just something to look at. You've seen this occur, or you will see this in other games. And then in the past, you might have seen this and thought, wow, why did he do that? King to the corner. Well, and since good players, the better the players are, when black sees king h1, he's like, well, if I do that, he's just going to go here. So it's a waste of a move to go knight g4 in some cases. So you'd see king h1 and black does something else, like, I don't know, like, knight to c6, whatever, it doesn't matter. Just making moves. You're like, well, he could just play this. Well, this is the king h1 allows domination in the retreat. So white doesn't lose ground, even though his bishop has retreated. He still controls the key squares that the knight was looking for. So that answers the bishop and knight domination. Okay. Rook and knight is another one where there's domination. So it's real basic stuff. The key thing for the rook and the knight is you want one square in between the two of them. Bam, the rook now dominates the knight. Notice the knight cannot go to c5 or e5 or f6 or d8 without being attacked by the rook. So it's basic stuff. So I want to show you something else. That a couple of things that my dad taught me. It was really funny stuff. We would play these matches. My dad was like, hey, let's play a match to 500. And I'm like, oh, okay. And my dad was like, that's not 500 games. It's 500 victories. Because we'd play 5 to 10 games a night. So, and this is like 1975, 1976, 1977. That was the time when I was in 1975. I was in 8th grade. And in the 8th grade was when I reached like the parity with my dad. So we could play, and it was 50-50. Sometime like in the last half of 8th grade, which would have been like 1976. So at that time it was on because we were on equal levels. He taught me when I was like 7 years old, 6 years old. I think I learned when I was 6, barely, how the pieces move. So it was like the thing was my dad was grooming me to have a monkey to play. Because back in the late 60s and the early 70s, there's no computers of chess. They don't exist yet. I mean, later on in the 70s, they did show up. They were expensive and not good. So we didn't get it. My dad didn't get a computer, but my dad didn't like that. He wanted to play people, which was primarily me. So anyway, my dad, we would play literally thousands of games, and I am not exaggerating. I'm undercutting the number. So anyway, my dad is like, we were playing in a game, and I'm just showing you. And so my dad would be white in this position, and I'm black here, and my dad goes, "Ha, you have a dark square bishop. Well, I'm just going to move in the white squares, buddy." So my dad's, that's how he would say it. It was a taunt, really. Hey, you can't mess with me, dark square bishop. I go in the white squares. So, but what turns out as a fun-loving taunt is actually an important lesson that when you're in the situation, that black bishop can't do anything to you if your guys are all on white squares. So that bishop is worthless to these guys. Okay? That bishop can't mess with these dudes at all. So it's just really funny stuff. It's not domination per se, but it's pretty good. So that was one of those funny things that happened back in those days. Man, we played a lot of games, dude. I am telling you, and it is not a joke. But there was something else that was coming to my mind, and I remembered the bishop taunt. So it'll come to me. We have opposition. Okay, this is basic opposition. Oh yeah, I remember what it was now. So this is basic opposition, king versus king. Whoever moves is losing ground. If it's black to move, well then white is going to stay with him and take the ground, whatever ground is advantageous to white when black moves. Conversely, if it's white to move, black does the same thing. Now there's another thing called diagonal opposition, which is fairly basic. You can see this directly. But I'm going to show you another version. There's another version of diagonal and another version of regular opposition. This is what is known, here is distant opposition. And you're like, well, how do you know? Well, I'm going to teach you how you can do this. It's real simple stuff. So this is distant opposition. This is also distant opposition. And you're like, how do you know this? Well, when I tell you, you will never forget it, and you're going to master this in like 5 seconds. So if you look at the kings, imagine the kings are on a rectangle. This rectangle is 1, 2, 3 by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is a 3 by 5 rectangle. 3 by 5. 3 times 5 is 15. That's an odd number. So if it's multiplies odd and you're on the corners, that's distant opposition. This is also a rectangle, but it's 1 by 5. Okay? So 1 by 5 is 5. That's odd. Distant opposition. Same thing here, 1 by 7. Distant opposition. 3 by 7, distant opposition, because this rectangle with these guys in the corners is odd numbered. So this is 3 by 7. This is 5 by 7. This is 35. An odd number. It ain't rocket science. This is also distant opposition 49, 7 times 7. Okay? So we're in opposition here because this is 1 times 3. If you are have had algebra or familiar with the algebra, this is called a matrix, which is a fancy name for a rectangle made of blocks. So this is a matrix. This is a square, which is a type of rectangle. Okay, but this is 3 by 3. You see that, right? So 3 by 3 is 9. This is opposition. So this is often called diagonal opposition, which is this. It's the same thing. But basically speaking, you really only have opposition and distant opposition. If you want to go diagonal opposition, okay, whatever floats your boat, right? This is diagonal, this is diagonal. It's distant opposition. You can call it what you want, it doesn't matter, as long as you master the concept of knowing where your opposition lies. So, whoever's move it is needs to move into opposition. If it's white's move, his oppositions, actually let's make it more interesting. If it's white's move, his oppositions are the close direct opposition here, D3. He gets the, the closest diagonal would be F3. This is still distant opposition. This is distant opposition. This is distant opposition on F1 and D1. So white has 4 white squares because they have to be on the same color. This is another basic thing. To get opposition, your king is going to have to be on the same color. Now there's a handful of problems where, because the squares are occupied by different pawns and pieces, I've seen these endgame studies where the opposition occurs, like on different colors, only because of some strange and arcane construction of the problem. We don't worry about that. This is basic tournament stuff. So if it's black's move, he's going to go the same thing. E4, C4, C6, or E6, whichever is the most advantageous for him. Just an opposition, if that's what you want. Okay, now I've done this before, but I'm going to do it again because it's always new to somebody. This is a sort of a type of opposition called the Trebuchet. And what happens here is that whoever moves, oops, sorry, my mistake. I forgot. White has to be at the bottom in the computer's world. All right. Okay, so this is correct. So whoever moves loses. Each one of them sits on the only square where they can defend the pawn. Okay. So if white moves, game over, Charlie. Right? Pretty basic stuff. Black is going to move. He goes here. It doesn't matter. He goes to either side and then just cashes. He comes here. Blah, blah. Oops, sorry. He goes to here. Shepherd position on the 7th rank. This is shepherd position. He's going to cash. There's nothing he can do at this point, right? Pretty basic stuff. So, that was white to move. Black to move. It doesn't matter where he goes. Game over, Charlie. Okay, and then he does the reverse. Oh, sorry. White does the reverse of what black did, and he's going to cash his pawn straight to freedom. So, this is the Trebuchet. Now, well, sorry, wrong one. There we go. That's it. So, now if it's white to move, the sequence for you should be very obvious. You should instantly go, king to f4, because it guards this pawn and attacks the black pawn, taking the Trebuchet opposition, forcing black to move, and then he's going to Pac-Man this pawn, waka, waka, waka. Okay. Then you go vice versa. That now, if it's black to move, you see how black moving king to d3 just loses to king to f4. This is the Trebuchet. We discussed this. Okay. So he would play something like this. And then you have the same kind of idea. But see, this is how white can finagle a position, because remember, these guys are in opposition. If it's black to move, he's going to lose opposition. And you're like, well, he's not going to lose opposition. Well, he is. But because the pawns are in different positions, the opposition is not the direct type. We're going to sidestep here. White can go to f4, but he really wants to go to f4 once black has gone to d3. So he sidesteps, goes to f5, threatens the pawn. Black cannot defend it from d4. The only square he can defend it on is here. And he uses this sidestep option to lure the black king into a bad square This is a Zugzwang, is what this is. So these guys are in opposition. Whoever moves is going to lose. This is what this teaches us. Well, technically that's not true because he could play here, I guess, right? So he could play there. I guess a better example is this one. So now they're in opposition, distant 3 by 5. So it's odd. 3 times 5 is 15. That's odd. They're in opposition. It's that simple. If black goes king d3, he's in trouble. Now, what happens here is that, so in this position, having the move wins. Crunch. The trebuchet flips. Now, since his white has to move away, he loses his pawn, game over. So you got to be very careful with how this stuff all works out. But it's important to know to help you in calculations, showing you some basic positions where you win, lose, or in some cases draw by holding opposition. I don't want to try and cover everything because that would take forever. But I want to give you basic things so that when you see this in the future, you could go, I understand. I remember he told us about opposition, blah, blah, blah. So, this is kind of boring, but I try to make it less boring and more exciting so that you're going to get the information you need in an easy way to understand it and learn something fun about those crazy days that I had when I was a younger kid. So hopefully you like this video. Subscribe, you'll get more of these pretty good stuff. Because I have a lot of funny stories that I tell about my dad when they come up from time to time in different games or what have you. Because we played thousands of games, man. I mean, I don't even know the number. It's crazy. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. It was real fun. I'll talk to you later.